everyone, it's Lauren and I'm here today with Jean to talk about our latest Feminist Orchestra pick, which was Trainwreck by Sady Doyle. So this was the book that we've been reading as part of the book club for the months of, I always get this wrong, September and October.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're new to the Feminist Orchestra, I'll leave a link to our Goodreads group in the description box below so you can see all the discussions that we've been having about these books.
So this was our second non-fiction book
Yes, it
of
is.
the year?
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading some non-fiction actually.
Yeah.
It's nice to get back into that
Yeah.
swing of it. And what Sady Doyle is focusing on in this book is the idea of the train wreck for a woman. So very classically looking at examples such as Britney Spears or Amy Winehouse, like the idea of women going off the rails, and why we love watching their downfall. And it is really interesting.
This book was in so many ways not what I was expecting it to be.
Yeah. Or it's something that I knew, it's something you know anecdotally.
Yes.
You're like, yeah, okay, I get that we have this obsession with women kind of going off the rails as such, but then when she's kind of listing all these examples back to you, you're like, oh yeah, actually that's quite a lot.
Yeah, these aren't just happening in like the void.
Yeah.
There's I really like non-fiction books like that, particularly sort of feminist non-fiction books that take something that you could quite easily just think of as a one-off thing and show you so many examples of it and pointing out that this isn't to do with individuals, this is to do with society.
Yeah, it's showing you a pattern.
Yeah.
That you're kind of too close to it to realise that on your own, I think.
Yeah.
And it also holds a bit of a mirror up to you and you think, oh yeah, I do think, like I have in the past thought that about people. What were your expectations going into the book?
So this is where it threw me off. So I'm expecting this book about Amy Winehouse, Lindsay Lohan, Amanda Bynes, Britney Spears, right? That's what I'm set up to expect from that book, and it does deliver on that as well. But also, as much of this book I felt was focused on historical examples, and it would go maybe into the 20th century and look at women like Marilyn Monroe or like Billie Holiday, so you'd get like 20th century media women, but it would go back even as far as Mary Wollstonecraft and I was not expecting, but it was really interesting because, I'm sure we'll get onto this, in some ways maybe it tries to do too much and there's too many people in it, but at the same time it was very fascinating to not just look at how this is not a modern phenomenon, that this is just a manifestation of something that's been going on for centuries.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that you could look at the modern version of it and think it's about women, you know, taking drugs and getting
being
drunk,
sexual.
Exactly, and sort of making fools of themselves and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it actually goes further back. It's about women's behaviour. It's not about being drunk or being an addict or kind of being a rock star. It's not about the excess that we perhaps look at it as within our modern society. It's just it has always been there.
Policing women's behaviour.
Exactly. Yeah. And something that I do think is interesting in it as well is she makes it clear that it's like the reason that we are so sort of morbidly fascinated with these train wrecks or these fallen women is because it's like a lesson to other women. Like, you don't want to become like this. This kind of behaviour is not acceptable.
Yeah. Whereas she draws that parallel with, you'll get like really famous like male rock stars who are like into their drugs, but they're like held up as some like, look at like Kurt Cobain and stuff, like men who like could quite easily get painted as a really bad role model for society, who were like treated themselves really terribly, and instead they're idealised because they're men.
Well, that's the same thing. That's something that she does say in the book. Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love are like, they're like the same person essentially, and the way that both of them are either kind of idolised or vilified by the same group of people is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, I have not read another non-fiction book focused on this specific side or angle of feminism, and I like that, but it did sometimes feel like maybe it was trying to do too much.
Well, that's the only criticism I'd have of it, I think. I mean, partly when she's talking about the more modern examples of train wrecks, I think we both agree that sometimes it gets a little bit anecdotal.
Yeah.
This isn't the most academic of books, which isn't a bad thing at all. It means it's really accessible, but sometimes it does make you think, is this just your opinion? Like, where are your references on some of these things? Just spilt coffee everywhere.
I always think of that kind of style as being a bit like a blog post. It's a bit like an opinion column. Or...
Yes, which isn't a bad thing.
No.
That's what it's a little bit like with the modern sections.
I just felt like sometimes maybe I thought all of these were so interesting but almost like handled too briefly. It wasn't a big book, and there was, again, not just modern women in it, so there's so much, and I thought that came together to make a really nice overarching point, but maybe would have liked more depth and detail on things. Yeah,
because I think she knows so much about the modern women. So when we're looking at more historical figures, I think there's quite a lot of historical figures thrown in there just to be able to bulk it out and to make her point. Like something that was really interesting was like the Mary Wollstonecraft thing.
Yeah.
And how her lifestyle was completely kind of against the grain at the time.
Yeah. I thought that was one of the best parallels.
Exactly, but there's some which really made sense. And even little things like Charlotte Bronte, like being so emotional and sending so many letters to her professor who didn't love her back, and this kind of idea of her being like too weak or too emotional, even though she has that kind of genius of literature as well. So certain examples I felt like, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah.
And then it felt like she had a couple of historical examples and then was like, oh god, I need some more historical figures, so I better put those in there.
It sort of all came together in the end, and I really liked the overarching message, but like, maybe it was maybe a bit rushed in some places, or some things weren't dealt with as well as they needed to be, so like, maybe those historical examples that we don't think were as good parallels would have been if she talked about them more. Sometimes it felt a little bit like clutching at straws. Yeah. Like it wasn't enough detail in the book to necessarily make that point, but that doesn't mean that in any way disproves the rest of the book.
No, exactly. I think that's the only thing I would say. That there's just so many examples.
Yeah.
To the point where sometimes it just felt a bit crowded.
Yeah.
In the book, maybe. But then maybe that is the point that she's trying to make.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't just isolated to one or two incidents.
Yeah.
Like it's almost universal.
And it was one of those books that made me feel, and this is my favourite thing about reading like political or like feminist, like social issue, like non-fiction, like this is what I want for it, is to feel like a visceral feeling. And I felt viscerally angry and disturbed and upset reading this book.
Yeah.
So that's really good. That I really liked. It made me feel emotions. It made me feel angry that women are treated like this. It made me feel like angry that I'd ever been sort of tricked into scorning women like Britney Spears or something like that.
Yeah, and that's something that I really liked as well, because she's not just talking about these women kind of in isolation and about their problems, she's linking it back to general kind of structural sexism, really, because she's saying what defines a train wreck. It's not just like, oh, my life has gone off the rails. It's also, it's all about being too much of something, like being too needy or being too emotional or
too
being
sexual.
too sexual, or like too much of an addict or
too aggressive.
Exactly, and she kind of links it back to this sort of tightrope that women have to walk, that like you have to be interesting but not too interesting, and like you have to be compliant but not boring, and all this like nonsense, and like you can really feel the anger in her writing actually, can't you? That she's like, well, this just shows like how difficult it is, like whatever you do there is no right answer, like someone's gonna hate you for your behaviour, like whatever it is.
It's interesting because in the sort of like academic world there's certainly those that lean towards the side of like all non-fiction research books, like you should be emotionally detached from your subject, which is something I don't like in any way agree with. I think that's like an excuse people make almost traditionally not to tackle hard topics or to tackle like niche topics or deal with people that are usually excluded. Like they're like, when actually I think like our emotions can really inform like intellectual discussion.
And it depends what you want to read as well. Like some people really want to read kind of just an academic text which just gives you facts and references and that's it, and some people prefer reading like an opinion piece like we were saying, and this perhaps marries the two quite well.
Although we were saying that like it's something that would be interesting to keep the discussion up about, because this book came out in 2016 and reading it now already felt like a lot changed.
Yes.
Not in that this has stopped happening, but that there's new women and things have happened to the women that she's talking about.
Yeah, I mean she leaves kind of Hillary Clinton at, I think, at the kind of leadership point, like where she's running for leadership. I don't understand American politics, sorry, but like at that point it's kind of pre-election.
Yes,
so
it must be, because if it came out sort of
I think she's done a
2016.
note. I think she's done an update to it saying obviously this happened. So you know that's not a problem if something goes out of date because she's trying to be current.
Or like the stigma around Miley Cyrus, whereas we were saying before that Miley Cyrus very much feels like she's reclaimed her image online. Like I don't feel like a lot of that negative media towards Miley Cyrus has really affected her in the long term.
No, but that's what's really interesting, and something that I can't remember if this is in the book, if the book paints it this way or if it's just my interpretation of it, but a lot of the examples she gives are people who don't necessarily have control of the narrative of them, of their downfall, like Amy Winehouse for example, whereas Miley Cyrus was a very calculated train wreck for media publicity. Like she knew what she was doing. She was like angelic kind of country singer, like
and
child
also,
pop star, and she was like, no, I'm gonna go crazy.
And also to make that point, it's like, stop trying to pick what I look like.
Well, like, yeah, I guess so. That's true. I mean, there's obviously like discussion as to how much of it was her just wanting to be like that, and how much of it she was just trying to create a scandal. I suppose because now she's just gone back to what she was, but she's a lot more famous than she was before, wasn't she? It's less about her being a bad person for doing that, though, is what I'm trying to say. I think it's more like. She'd identified that, like all the people around her had identified that that's something that gets women attention, like a good girl gone bad thing is like that's what they'd identified was going to work, and it did work. And I don't know how she feels about it now. Give her a ring, ask her.
Or like, and as well, when she did talk about though that sort of like whole thing about like magazines being offended when Miley Cyrus was sexualizing herself, when they had been sexualizing her when she was a teenager and trying to do the upskirt. So like she talks about how the media, although they're trying to get rid of that now, aren't they, but the media is so obsessed with doing like upskirt photos of women, which is basically like a form of like sort of
sexual harassment.
Yeah, sexual harassment, like that is not okay. Like you, and with cases like Miley Cyrus, this was somebody who was a teenager and they are like sexualizing her, they are like basically creating like underage porn, trying to like catch her in compromising positions, but as soon as she turns and she's like, hey, I'm like all sexual and I'm going to be sexual on stage and I'm going to like do sexual dance moves, it's like, oh my god, horrifying, and it's like you egg that on.
Yeah, but that's what's so interesting though, isn't it? Because that's the whole point of the Trainwreck and how the Trainwreck can exist. It's because the media is waiting for that fall the whole time. And when people are young and innocent, like the reason that's interesting is because you're thinking it's all gonna go wrong. We'd love to hear from you if you read the book and what you thought of it, or if this discussion has made you more interested to read it. You haven't got around to reading it yet. Also, I'd be quite interested if people are watching the Feminist Orchestra videos, what you prefer us to be reading. Like, do you enjoy the non-fiction more than the fiction, or the other way around? Would you like a nice mix?
Because we're coming up to picking our 2019 reads.
Exactly. So we'll be doing that, I guess, in January next year.
Somebody did request on one of my videos that maybe we read Zammy. Audre Lorde's, but we can put that on the short list.
We can put that on there, we'll have a little think. But yeah, we'd like to know what you find interesting and what kind of books you're interested in reading next year, so we can put the little shortlist together.
Over the next 2 months we'll be reading Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, which is science fiction, one of the first published science fiction novels by black women, I think. So that'll be up on my channel, I guess, at the beginning of January.
Oh, exciting. Alright, we'll talk to you in the comments below and we'll see you next time.
Bye!
Make your mind and get in line. 5, 6, 7, 8. Do, 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 do. Lovely. Good, we're so professional, that's what I like the most.
This is what YouTube's all about.